So, dear friends, today we shall discuss the externalities, its different types, and the presence of externality. How does it makes the market fail to fix the efficient quantity, and that is called the market failure. So, before going to discuss our externalities, first we have to define or we have to understand what is market failure exactly is. So, market failure it occurs when resources are misallocated or allocated inefficiently. That is also called pareto inefficiency. It is the economic situation defined by an inefficient distribution of goods and services in the free market. Market failure occurs when the price mechanism, that is, we know our MRMC principle, that is, marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost, and that principle fails to account for all of the costs and benefits necessary to provide and consume a goods. The supply and demand within the market do not produce the quantities of the goods where the price reflects the marginal benefits of consumption, and this imbalance causes allocative inefficiency, and that allocative inefficiency is called our market failure. And there are different causes of market failures like your public goods, asymmetric informations, and exactly our externalities. So today we shall discuss how the presence of externality leads to market failure. So first we are now defining what is externality is. An externality, that we may say it is the cost or benefit resulting from some activity or transaction that is imposed upon or generated to parties outside the activity or transaction without any compensation or received payment. So here the externalities that are, we can say it is the values that are generated in our production and consumption process. It arises whenever the actions of one economic unit, that economic unit may be producer, consumer, or may be government, make another economic agent worse or better off. Yet the first agent neither bears the cost nor receive the benefits of doing so. So when we are generating some values, may it be positive or negative, and for that we are not making any payment, then it doesn't come under the market mechanism, and that leads to market failure. So in discussing our externalities and market failure, some terminologies are there like our marginal social cost, marginal private cost, and marginal external cost, and we have to define all these things. So marginal social cost, it is nothing but the composition of marginal private cost and marginal external cost. So what is marginal private cost? That marginal private cost is nothing but our cost of productions, that is, we spent on our factors of production to get more and more output. So when we incur additional cost to get one more unit of production, then it is called our marginal cost or marginal private cost. And in spite of our marginal private cost, we have to incur some other cost in our production and consumption process, and that is called our marginal external cost. In our production and consumption process, sometimes we create some damage and it is imposed on the society, and for that we do not make any compensation. Then that damage or that cost, it is imposed on the society, and that extra cost is called our marginal external cost. So here we are having the three curves. One is our marginal external cost, one is our marginal private cost, and one is our marginal social cost. So as we know, when our quantity increases, then along with our increased quantity, our additional cost of producing, that is determined by marginal private cost, that curve shows along with our quantity our cost of production is also increasing. And that marginal external cost curve, it is also upward sloping by its natural dynamics. When our quantity increases, then definitely our damage on society, that will gradually increase, so that curve is also upward sloping. Now if we add up this marginal external cost and marginal private cost, then we are getting our another curve that is called marginal social cost curve. So here marginal social cost curve, it is also upward sloping, as our marginal private cost and marginal external cost that is also increasing along with our additional unit. So now, how the presence of externality leads to market failure. For that we have four four parts. One is our positive externality in production, then negative externality in production, and then we'll discuss positive externality in consumption and negative externality in consumption. So positive externality in production, it is when economic unit, here definitely it is the producer, in its production process creates benefits for others for which he does not receive any payment, then he he is generating positive externality. The examples may be, suppose a construction a bridge or a highway reduces the transportation cost and increases the land values in the neighboring areas. So when the landowner of the neighboring areas, they are getting benefits by the construction of bridge or highway, their their land value is getting increased, but for that they are not making any payment to the producer. So here that positive values is generated, and for that we are not making any payment, so it is positive externality, and that positive externality, it will definitely lead to market failure. So here we are having marginal private benefit curve, and there is also our marginal social benefit curve. So here, as it is the externality in production and not in consumption, so our marginal private benefit curve coincides with our marginal social benefit curves, and that curve, like our natural demand curve, it is downward sloping. As our quantity increases, then our utility or benefit received from additional unit, that is getting reduced gradually. So our marginal private benefit curve is gradually diminishing, and here our marginal private cost curve is S, and that is our marginal social cost curve. So as there is positive external in production, so the producer, they are generating some benefits, and that are enjoyed by the society, so its cost is getting reduced. So here marginal, when we add up the marginal external cost with our marginal private cost, then our marginal social cost curve, it will be lying below than our marginal private cost curve. So here we are having marginal social cost curve, and there is our marginal private cost curve. So from private point of view, when the marginal private cost curve intersects with our marginal benefit curve, then he is determining his equilibrium quantity at Q1, and that is our free market equilibrium quantity. But as the production process, it is generating some externality, so here our social marginal cost curve, it intersects our marginal benefit curves, and it fixes the optimal quantity, that is socially efficient quantity, at point Q2. So here the social optimal quantity is Q2, but from private point of view our quantity is Q1. So the producer, he will produce the free market quantity, that is Q1, and he is not producing the socially optimal output, that is Q2. So that due to the divergence between our marginal external cost, marginal social cost, and marginal private cost, our market fails to fix the efficient quantity at Q2. So here we are having underproduction. Why it is called underproduction? Because the society demands our optimal quantity up to Q2, but the producer, he is producing up to Q1. So the gap between Q1 and Q2, it is our underproduction. So that underproduction, it is due to the presence of positive externality in production. Now, the negative externality in productions. So, in our production process, our producer, he also generates some negative values, and that is imposed on the society, and for that he is not making any compensation. Then it is called our negative externality. So, negative externality in production occurs when the production of a good causes a harmful effect to a third party without compensation. Then it is called our negative externality. We may take the example: suppose a paper mill that produces paper, and the waste is dumped into a river. The riverside residents and the fishes are hurt by the waste. So, when the paper mill is producing paper on its production process, he is also imposing some cost on the society, and that cost is called our marginal external cost, and for that the producer, he is not making any compensation. And due to that negative externality, again there is divergence between marginal social cost and marginal private cost. So here our marginal private cost, it is lying below than our marginal social cost, because due to our marginal external cost, now our marginal social cost is getting greater than the marginal private cost, and our marginal social cost curve, that is lying above than the marginal private cost. So from private point of view, when our marginal private cost curve intersects our marginal social benefit curve or our marginal private benefit curves at point A, then it is determining its efficient quantity at Q, and that is called our free market allocation. That is, our equilibrium is attained at point Q. Now, from social point of view, as our marginal social cost curve intersects our benefit curves, then at point B that reaches its equilibrium, and it is fixing the equilibrium quantity at Q1, and that Q1 is called our socially efficient allocation. So here our society, it demands to produce Q1, but the producer is producing output up to Q. So the producer is producing more than our socially optimal quantity. So that gap between Q and Q1, that is our overproduction, and that overproduction means our misallocations of resources. That is, the market fails to fix the equilibrium quantity, that is socially optimum quantity, and the market fails. That market failure is called our pareto inefficiency, and that pareto inefficiency arises due to the presence of negative externality. Now, before going to discuss our positive and negative externality in consumptions, another term that is called marginal social benefit, marginal private benefit, and marginal external benefit, that we have to define. So marginal social benefit, that is, again, it is the composition of marginal private benefit and marginal external benefit. Marginal private benefit is nothing but when our we are consuming or producing a quantity, then from additional unit, that utility we derive or benefit we derive, that is called our marginal private benefit. And here the schedule is called, it denotes when our quantity is getting increase, then our marginal private benefit, that is getting reduced, and that is due to the application of law of diminishing marginal utility. For the additional quantity, our benefit or utility received from the additional unit, that is getting reduced. And along with our marginal private benefit, that marginal external benefit, that is enjoyed by our society, and along with our increased quantity, again our marginal external benefit, that is also getting reduced. Now if we add that both, for each quantity, if we add our marginal private benefit and marginal external benefit, then we are getting our marginal social benefit. So that marginal social benefit, that is also getting reduced when our quantity of output increases. So here that curve, it shows our marginal private benefit, and that is due to the law of diminishing marginal utility, that curve is getting diminishing. That means for additional quantity of consumption or production, our extra utility derived from that quantity, that is getting reduced. And our marginal external benefit curve, that is also downward sloping, that is also due to the law of diminishing marginal utility. And that benefit curve shows that the society, when it receives some benefits, then for additional quantity, our benefit from additional unit of output, that is also getting reduced. Now if we add up both our marginal external benefit and marginal private benefit, then we are getting our marginal social benefit. As for example, at quantity r star, our marginal private benefit, that is our b prime, and marginal external benefit is our a prime b prime. Now if we add up both a prime b prime and b prime, then we are getting a b prime. That a b prime, that is our a b prime, that is our marginal social benefit at the output r star. So our marginal benefit social benefit curve, it is also downward sloping. Now our positive externality in consumptions. So now as the externality exits in our consumption process, so our divergence arises between marginal private benefit and marginal social benefit, but our cost curve is remains same as it is for marginal social cost and marginal private cost. So there is no divergence between marginal social cost and marginal private cost, because the externality emerges not in production but in consumption. Now our marginal social cost curve, it is upward sloping, and our marginal private benefit curve is downward sloping. Both the curve when intersects at point A, then it is fixing the equilibrium quantity at Q, and that is called private output or private consumption quantity. That is free market allocation. But from social point of view, as our marginal social benefit curve is lying above our marginal private benefit curve, and marginal social benefit curve intersects our marginal cost curve, then it fixes the optimal quantity at Q1. So from social point of view, the quantity should be Q1, but the private individual, he is fixing the quantity at Q. So here the difference between Q and Q1, that shows there is under consumption, and that under consumption, it is nothing but our misallocation of quantity, and that misallocation is called our market failure, and that market failure arises due to the positive externality in consumption. Now there is negative externality in consumption. Negative externalities in consumption occurs when the consumption of a good results in social cost without compensation. So in our consumption activities, when we are imposing some cost on the society, or we are creating some damage on the society, and for that damage we are not making any compensation, then we are generating negative externalities. Let us take an example. When a smoker causing secondhand smoke to people around him, and does not pay for the cost to others, then that person is generating negative externality in his consumption process. When he is smoking, then his due to his smoking, his neighbor or his the people around him, they are getting harm, and that person is not making any compensation, as he is creating some harm to the others. So that is our negative externality in consumption. And again, negative externality in consumption also leads to market failure, as before our marginal social benefit curve, and here we are having our marginal private benefit curve. Now our marginal private benefit, it is lying above than our marginal social benefit, because there is negative externality, and due to that negative externality, now our marginal social benefit curve is lying below than the marginal private benefit. And from private point of view, when this curve intersects with our marginal social cost curve or marginal private cost curve, then the quantity is fixing at Q, and that is our free market allocation. But from the social point of view, when our marginal social benefit curve intersects our marginal social cost curve at point K, then its efficient quantity is fixed at Q1. So society fixes the quantity, that is optimal quantity, at Q1, but the private individual, he is fixing his quantity at Q. So there is over consumption, and that over consumption, it is the example of our market failure, and that overconsumption arises due to the presence of negative externalities. So friends, here we have seen due to the presence of externalities in our production and consumption process, sometimes our market fails to fix the optimum quantity, and it is producing overproduction, or there is underproduction. Again, due to the negative externality in consumption and positive externality in consumption, we are getting there is another situation, under consumption and over consumption. So these are the cases of our misallocations of resources, and it is called our market failure, and that market failure arises due to the presence of externalities. So in our next class, we will discuss how these negative externalities or positive externalities can be internalized, and what government measures or private mechanism that can tackle that externality problem, and we can avoid our market failure, and we can reach our pareto efficiency situation. Thank you.